Welcome. This is Donna with More Than Review, and we are in Cincinnati, Ohio at the International Christian Retail Show. We're thrilled to be with Anita, who I met last year. She is both an author and a coach and a speaker. So she's going to share a little bit about herself today and then a little bit about her book, which is Getting Through What You Can't Get Over. Yes, we all need it. She's written it for all of us. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself in the book.
I am Anita Brooks, as you said, and I went through a season of my life that was literally one of those times when it was a tsunami waves of issues that kept coming, to the point that I had multiple people not in the same setting say to me, you're like a female version of Job right now. And you know how you can either laugh or cry? So I said, well, just call me Jobette. It wasn't quite that trite, but I did learn from those experiences that there are things that we absolutely will go through and will never get over. If someone loses a child, they're not going to get over that. If someone loses their home to foreclosure, that's always going to be like a traumatic trigger. And what I discovered through my own life, as well as interviewing many other people and doing research, is that there are several people that we interact with and we're not even aware of who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. So PTSD is not just a military issue, but there are common traumas that many people in everyday life deal with, and they have symptoms of. They may not even be aware of it themselves, but even if they are, certainly the people around them are not. So I just have a heart to help the hurting.
So what would be one piece of advice you would give somebody who either suspects they could be going through the PTSD, or they know somebody? What would be their first step?
One of I think the biggest pieces of advice I would give is to remember that human beings are like volcanoes, and I'll explain that. So if you think of our emotions like magma, we tend as human beings to want to stuff our emotions down. But you can only stuff down as far as the last thing that was there. So that just keeps going higher, higher, higher. But when a volcano has small vents to release pressures and stress, they don't tend to have that big, massive explosion. We human beings are somewhat like that. So if we can find a safe place to vent, and I caution you, make sure it's a safe place, but a safe place to vent, what happens is we tend to release those pressures so that we don't have that explosion and splatter all over someone else. So that would be one of the first things that I would say.
So you kind of made a notation there of safe place. So kind of tell me what you're thinking there.
Well, not everyone is safe, sadly. If you tell someone something in confidence and they break that confidence, it can actually exacerbate the wound, the emotional wounds that you have. I'm a Christian, so my faith is really important to me. And I tell people the safest place you can go is take it to Jesus. You can trust him. He is never going to betray our trust. But then, maybe going to a professional therapist or counselor if needed, a trusted pastor, but someone that is not going to repeat your confidences. That's crucial.
Yeah, very good, very good. So I loved a saying you had, is that you may have breath in your body but not be alive. So what would you say to someone who's listening who feels that way?
Well, first I would say you're not alone. So many people who are almost walking zombie-like through life, just barely waking up in the morning and getting through the day. It can be a lonely thing, a dark place. You're not alone. There are people who care about you. There are people who understand. And there are people who have what I call experiential empathy. Experiential empathy is that thing that says they've been through not exactly what you've been through. They're not going to say, I know exactly what you're going through, but they have enough similarity in their background that they have compassion, and they have a deep, just that empathy that says that it's more than sympathizing with you. It's something that says your hurts matter, you matter to me.
So if there's one thing you want people to get out of the book, what would that be?
Well, in the first chapter, I tell this amazing story. I was in a pit, and I'll be honest with you, I was suicidal at the time. I understand what that can feel like. But I ended up going to a conference, and I just had a miraculous experience where the speaker at the meet and greet, for some reason, reached out, grabbed my hand, and she was a prisoner of war survivor from Auschwitz. And in a deep Hungarian accent, she slaps the top of my hand and she says, "We must meet. God has spoken." Now, I'm going to be honest with you, my first reaction was to look over my shoulder and go, "Are you talking to me?" And then I'm thinking, I didn't hear God say anything. But she was adamant, and so I went and met her for breakfast the next day, and she shared an amazing thing with me. After she listened to me, and she taught me the value of just hearing someone, not trying to fix them, not interrupting them, but hearing them. So she gave me that gift first. But then after she heard me fully, she said, "You're familiar with the 23rd Psalm, are you not?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Do you not feel as if you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death right now?" And I broke. And I was just crying. And she said, "I want you to take note." She said, "God does not tell us to slow down. He does not tell us to stop. He doesn't say pitch a tent. He does not say build a house. He says walk. And when you feel as if you do not have the strength to take one more step, you remember me and you remember this meeting and you walk anyway." And she changed my life. And now I get to share that with other people and encourage other people to walk anyway.
Oh my goodness, that gives me chills. That is amazing. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what made you, like, having gone through that, to put that in a book format? Like,
This book was born interesting. Well, one thing, when you have been through a series of traumatic events, you do have a compassion like you've never had before and an empathy you've never had before. So it may sound odd, but those traumatic events have been a great gift to me, because now I get to share encouragement and a hope and a joy for other people. But one day, and after countless people who would come to me because they had either heard or known some of the things I've been through, they would come and talk to me and ask to speak with me. And it's interesting, I'm a strong extrovert, but I've become known as being a really good listener. And a lot of that comes from those experiences. But I heard myself say to someone one day with deep compassion, there are just some things in life that we can get through, but we'll never get over. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I knew that that was something I had to write in a book to share with a lot of people.
that is, well, and I think because so many people try to make you think, oh, you'll get over it, and you just need time and you'll get over it. So that's
Yes.
amazing.
There's a Proverbs that says, it's one of my favorites, and I quote it in the book, and it says, like taking a cloak from a man on a cold day or pouring vinegar in his soda is singing songs to a heavy heart. See, we think when someone is heartbroken that we should try to fix them, but instead we should come alongside them, listen to them, love them, and let them grieve. Grieving is important.
That's good, because I think, so I was going to ask you, like, if there's one piece of advice that when we do see someone hurting, like, what would you would recommend, like, kind of listening to them and not trying to fix?
Right. I mean, one of the things that God continues to teach me, but I share a lot with other people, is, He gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak, but especially so for a hurting person. If we want to help the hurting, if we listen to them, that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give, because so many times people run away, they don't want to hear it, they get tired of it. But the fact is, part of the grieving process is to process it over and over again until they reach that place where they're able to deal with it and heal.
So I read on your website that you like to be at a conference and you'll notice people that you feel like are hurting. So we're at a conference. So what do you challenge us to do that you feel like is safe for them and for us? Like how do you approach somebody, and how do you make them feel like, I do notice you, people know you?
That's a great question. I don't know that anyone's ever asked me that before. I love that.
I was fascinated by that, especially
Yeah.
being at the conference.
Yeah, I mean, I look for facial expressions, body language. I think that's a lot of how God used Edie with me that day. Because one of the questions she asked me was, "What is this pain that is etched in your eyes?" But I do look for those things in people because sometimes we'll try to screw on the happy mask, but if you look closely, you can see beyond that. And so I'll just walk up to someone and say, "How are you doing today? Is there something I can pray for you about? Um, you know, Tell me about the best thing or the hardest thing you've been through in the last month." That's a question that opens up a whole door for people. But in all honesty, it's giving them permission to share and then truly listening to what they're saying.
So have you had any unique experiences when you talk to people?
Oh, I've had countless. I mean, I don't even know if I could choose one. I've had many times, I speak all over the country, and so it's interesting how many big, strong, grown men will end up crying and saying to me, "I've been carrying this weight around. This is the first time I've ever felt like it was okay for me to talk about it." Or, they'll come up and they'll ask if they could speak with me privately, just in the back corner of the room or something. And the stories that people have shared with me, sometimes it's secrets from way back in childhood or young adulthood, and just things that people carry. We don't keep secrets. Secrets keep us. They keep us captive. And so that's been one of the beautiful things is when I begin to ask people and show genuine interest in them as a human being, many times they will open up and just share things that have been maybe locked up for years.
So have you always had a genuine interest in people, or is that something that came from your experiences, or do you pray like God give me like a genuine heart for people?
Great question. You are a good interviewer. So, one, when I was younger, I cared about people, but I didn't have the deep compassion for people that I felt like I should have, and frankly, I wanted to have. I remember praying almost exactly what you just said and saying, "God, give me more of a heart for people." Be careful what you pray for.
Exactly.
He
No
did
praying
it.
for patience
Yeah.
anymore.
No, yeah, or humility. Oh, I prayed for that once. But I wouldn't trade it. As hard as it's been, and I've had times when I have wrestled with God. I've lain on my living room floor and I've cried out and said, "I can't do this. I I don't know what you're up to, and maybe I should want it, but I don't want it. If it means going through this, I don't want it." I've told him, "I know that I'm supposed to thank you in all things, but I'm not ever going to thank you for this." He made a liar out of me. I cannot tell you how many things I have been through that I've had those kinds of thoughts and I've even said those things about. And yet today I can sit here and honestly tell you, I thank him, I praise him for every single thing that I have been through. There's not been one thing wasted, and everything he has used to be able to help and encourage another person. Joel 2:25 says, "I will restore the years the locust have eaten, the great locust and the small locust." And I am walking proof. And my tagline is, "It's never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith." And I could have never said that if I hadn't walked through those valleys.
So how long did it take you from like going through that valley to being at the place where you can say, "It's okay, I can thank you now because of, the fruit coming out of it"? Like, does it happen like overnight?
No. And that's another great question because it would never be the same answer for two different situations. Grief is messy. In the book I talk about the 7 stages of grief. There's 7 distinct steps. However, the order of those steps is not going to be the same for any two people or any two set of circumstances. So, for instance, I can speak about this publicly because my husband has given me permission to do this, but I have walked through infidelity as a wife where, I've been betrayed. And that is one of the most painful things I've ever been through. It took years. My husband and I are in a place today, though, like we have an amazing marriage. And I tell him all the time, I don't just love you, I adore you. That was something that I wrestled with, I cried through, I wanted to die through many, many times over. But I kept doing what Edie said, one foot in front of the other. This is something else she told me. She said, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, one day you will look up and you will suddenly realize you have stepped out of the darkness into the light. And I remember the day that I laughed and it was real. It wasn't forced, it wasn't fake. It was just a real laugh. And that was the moment when I went, Edie was right. I'm stepping back into the light. There have been other things that it didn't take nearly as long. It just depends on how deep the hurt is. But I would just say to people who are hurting, don't give up. I know what it feels like to want to give up, but don't give up, because if you keep walking, you will eventually walk right out of that valley. No matter if it's a short valley or a long valley, it's going to determine that time, but keep walking.
So I did not know your story with your husband, but I am a firm believer that there is a war on marriages right now.
Yes.
So just throwing this out there, because I know it's probably not part of the book, but if there's one piece of advice you can give to couples right now, like what can we do to battle this? Because I feel like it's spiritual warfare.
It is, and I do marriage coaching now, which is just mind-boggling to, again, God's restoration. But you know, the one piece of advice that I would give to married couples today, besides don't give up, is take God at His word. You know, people will say to me all the time, you know, I believe in God. And I say, that's great. I'm so, happy to hear that. But may I ask you a question? Never been turned down yet, but this is my question. Do you believe God?
I'm doing that Bible study right now.
Oh, awesome.
They
awesome.
literally they ask you that question,
Yeah.
because we will all say, and it's harder to answer than you realize.
It is. And so in marriage, dare to believe God for your marriage, because dare to believe God's promises are as true for you as they were for anyone He wrote about in the Bible, for anyone that you might look at and go, oh, I can understand why God would do something for her or for him, but not me. Stop that. Dare to believe God. Dare to believe that He means good for you and for your marriage. And the other thing is, every day, on a practical level, look at your spouse and be intentional to list 3 things every day that you are grateful for in them. And write them down. It's been proven when you write things down, it embeds more deeply in your brain. Every day, write down 3 things about your spouse that you're grateful for. It will transform your thinking because it renews your mind and puts you in a place of thankfulness.
Okay, this is a challenge to everybody. This is going to be more than just one blog post. I've already decided it. So we're going to follow back up with that. That's even going to be on our Facebook page. We're going to challenge you guys. We're going to think about this, Kay and I, but we're going to have a challenge, and we're going to share these things and hold each other accountable that we're doing this. And I would even challenge your spouse. I mean, I would love to know if my husband could write 3 things right now
Yes.
that he's grateful for.
Yes.
But so just taking that into consideration, make sure. We're going to close out now. You'll see more from Anita on our Facebook page. If you happen to miss it, go back and see our Facebook Live interview. Thank you.